Good afternoon. This is Danny Elms once again. This will be part 2 of the NAR forms. And in this section, we will discuss the actual forms that have been either updated or brand new. And again, there are 18 forms, 14 that have been modified, and 4 brand new. So just to begin, well, let me highlight something just real quick before we jump into it. Here were from part 1. 7 forms from the listing side have been updated. The biggest one will be the listing agreements and the amendment to listing. 7 on the buying side. The biggest one will be the buyer rep agreement, which is now called the long form, and the amendment to the buyer rep agreement, as well as compensation agreement between brokers. And here are the new forms, the 4 of them. We'll discuss all 4 of these and a couple of the ones on the previous 2 slides. So let's start here with TXR 1101. So remember, we are on the listing side. And remember, the lawsuit is specific to we have got to be transparent when it comes to how much commission is being paid by the seller and how that commission is being split between the selling agent and the buying agent, or the listing agent and the buying agent, if you prefer that collective term. So because of that, this form was updated, the exclusive right to sell. And the exclusive right to lease looks very similar to this. So we're going to focus on this document here because of the sake of time and trying to keep it short. So if you look at the listing agreement, there is paragraph 5 and paragraph 8 that talk about the commission. Paragraph 8 is no longer there. It has been moved into paragraph 5, broker compensation. And you will fill out either paragraph 5A or paragraph 5B. These are mutually exclusive. So let's make it easy. I'm going to go to 5B first. 5B says broker's fee without compensation to the other broker. So in this case, you're picking up the listing agreement and the seller said, I will not pay the buyer's agent commission. Okay, fair enough. If that's the case, you will check 5B1A, put a little X right there, and put how much the listing or the seller is paying to United in our case. Maybe 2%, maybe 1%, maybe we can get a full 3%, or they'll pay you a flat fee, let's say of $5,000. That is paragraph B. It's quite simple. They're not paying a buyer's rep's commission. But for the most part, we hope you will fill out paragraph 5A, which is when there is a commission being offered to the cooperating broker. So in my example here, I've said that the seller has agreed to pay a total of 4%, 4% to both sides. And before I go to the next paragraph, you come down here and you say, of this 4% that they're paying United, we're going to give 2% of that 4% to the cooperating broker. I don't deal with subagents, so I left that blank. But if you deal with subagents, you can put a figure here. And if you had put, instead of 4%, let's say they're going to pay you a flat fee of $10,000 to sell their house, maybe you give $5,000 to the cooperating broker. That's how this paragraph works. Now, what's this about a 77 Pontiac Firebird? Real example, I tried to pick up a listing in Farmers Branch, and they had a 77 Firebird in the garage that would go to the listing agents who sold their house. Unfortunately, I did not pick up that listing, but it was offered to me as the listing agent. I wish I'd got the listing, but I didn't. So you can have a tangent thing, a thing, in this case a Pontiac, or maybe a trip to Spain, or a painting that would be given to you as the listing agent to list the house. Now, obviously, you can't split a Firebird, but that's why it's here in paragraph B. You split up here, telling the listing agent what they're paying the buying agent 2%. That is the biggest change on the listing agreement. Now, the next slide goes down to the same listing agreement, see 1101. This is paragraph 11F. Seller does or does not authorize the broker, which is us, United, to share with the other brokers and prospective buyers that the seller will consider contributing an amount toward buyers' expenses. Okay? Look what's in bold here. Seller is not obligated to pay any specific amount and has sole discretion to determine the amount seller will pay towards the buyer's expenses during negotiations with the buyer. That's important because that's what this lawsuit is all about. The seller cannot be kept in the dark about how much of the compensation they're paying to our broker United will be shared with the cooperating broker. So in the previous slide, I said, for example, 4 and 2. 4 and 2. Remember, this document is between we, the broker, and the listing agent. The buyer has no concept of what is written here. But with paragraph 11F, we are saying we, the listing agent, are authorized to discuss or disclose to the buying agent that yes, the seller is offering some form of compensation. Now, does it have to be the full 2%? No. If you can get away with only paying 1%, then why not allow the seller to keep the other 1%? Okay. But keep this in mind, just because you save them 1% doesn't mean you get to keep the other 1%. The seller has to agree to that. Okay. So that's paragraph 11F. So make sure you check this box that they allow you to discuss it. I don't see a lot of times that they don't discuss it because you want to sell their house. So they should give you every tool in your toolbox to do that, sell their house. The next document we'll discuss, still from the listing side, is the Amendment to Listing TXR 1404. You've probably used this amendment in the past. For example, your listing's about to expire, you need to extend it. Okay. Or perhaps you're having to drop the price of the house or the lease. In this example, I gave the listing price in paragraph 3 of the listing is changed to $2,400 just to throw in that this does affect leases as well. Okay. And I put in paragraph B, a new date that it extends it to. But the big change is here where it talks about compensation. So look at this. We have two choices, and I used paragraph D as the example here, but we'll read both. TXR 1101 and 1201 only. Okay, that's the listing agreements. The broker's fee is changed to paragraph 5A1 or 5B1 as follows. Okay, and you'd put it here. So why would you do that? Well, let's say in the previous example where we actually saved the seller 1%. They only paid 1% to the buyer's agent, not 2. You're going to go in here and change it from 4% to 3%. Hopefully that makes sense. But if they allow you to keep all 3%, you wouldn't have to change it. But that's where they change it if they say, no, Mr. Listing Agent, I'm going to keep the 1% for myself as the seller. And here, paragraph B is if they took the Pontiac Firebird off or added a Pontiac Firebird. Now, paragraph D, again, it is referencing the listing agreements, 1101 and 1201, says the compensation paid to the other broker in paragraph 5A2 is changed as follows. If the other broker represents the buyer, 2%. So in my example prior, we had the buying agent only taking 1%. So I would change the document here. Remember, I had 2% here. I wish I had done it a little different when I did the examples. But let's say this says we're paying the other broker 1.5%. Then to change the amendment, I would come in here and put the new percentage we're paying the buyer's agent. Okay, and that's all negotiable. And that's why the prior slide, paragraph 11F says the seller is not obligated to pay what we put in the listing agreement. But if they're not paying what we put in the listing agreement, you must go to the amendment to listing agreement, which is right here, 1404. Okay, hopefully that makes some sense. The other part of these documents, the amendment to listing, are basically the same, but it's this section here that was changed due to the lawsuit. All right, we're going to move quickly from the listing side to the buying side. And you've had a buyer before and you filled out the buyer's rep agreement, which is 5 pages. This basically is the old buyer's rep agreement called the long form, 1501. And this section here is what has been modified and changed, right? And remember, we're on the buying side at this point. Paragraph 7, broker's compensation. Important you discuss this with your buyer so they understand what they're signing. Broker compensation or the sharing of compensation between brokers is not set by law nor fixed, controlled, recommended, or suggested by the Association of Realtors, MLS, or any listing service. Broker compensation is fully negotiable. Brokers independently determine their fees. On and on and on. We've already known that, but apparently we have to now ensure the buyers understand that. Okay, so here you've gone to your buyer and you say, okay, I can't open the first door to show you a house. Remember part one, that I could be fined $1,000 approximately if I do open a door and I don't have a buyer's rep agreement or a virtual tour. So don't chance it. So have them sign this long form 1501 that says broker's fee. You, the buying agent, will receive 2% or 2,500. Now this is an and or because you don't know what's being offered on the other side yet. There's the purchases, there's the leases. So look at this source of compensation. If such persons refuse or fail to pay the broker the amount specified, who are these people? Well, we're going to seek payment from the seller and their agents. So if the seller or their agents refuse to pay this 2% that our buyer signed, the client, which is a buyer, will pay United, the broker, the amount specified, any amounts broker receives from such persons. So you need to explain to them that you're going to do the best job you can to negotiate for them, but they will be responsible, the buyer, responsible for any of the commission, 2% that is not paid by the seller. Now, they might be saying, I'm not going to sign this document. Well, maybe you have to go in with 0.5% to get them to see the first house. But do not show them the house until they sign this document. Okay? Now, what happens if you sign it for 0.5% or 0.25% or whatever the fee is, or this number here, right? And you buy a house that's paying a lot more than that. You can collect it, but you've got to do the amendment to the buyer's rep agreement. Pretty simple. All right, so let's go now to the next slide, which is the short form. The short form. My apologies, I was trying to make the slides bigger. Give me a second. Short form, slide number 21. And I'm just going to go down to slide 21. Here it is. Okay, hopefully it's a little bit bigger on the screen. My apologies if they weren't big enough for you to see previously. This is called a short form. This is brand new form created just for the lawsuit. It's called a short form because it's a one pager. And reading through it, you can see the parties, type in the name of the buyers, and sign below, type in the second buyer's name. We're United Real Estate. Appointment, definitions. Where will we show homes? This could be one specific property. In my example, I put Dallas County, Collin County, Denton, Tarrant, Rockwell County. But feel free to, you can say the state of Texas, or you can say 123 Main Street, Dallas, Texas, 75240. The term begins June 30th, ends December 31st. Now, broker's obligations, this is brand new here, paragraph 5. First choice, full services. The broker, United, will use broker's best efforts to assist the client in acquisition of the property in the market areas, which were here, paragraph 3. Okay, not much different than the buyer's rep agreement. Long form, it's just a short form because you will do what is in paragraph 6, 7, and 8. Okay, but if you choose showing services, basically you will, what you are doing in this case is you're opening a door, but you're doing nothing more than opening the door to whatever property or counties you put in here, and you're not writing any contracts. You're doing nothing but a showing service. But look what it says. Paragraph 6, 7, and 8 do not apply. Broker will provide client with access to properties in the market area. Paragraph 3. Client will pay broker a fee of, and you put in a fee here that you expect to be paid before you open that first door. You can put $0 here. You can put $50, but you're expected to collect that $50. Now, what we as a broker have to figure out going forward is, sorry, my screen froze, and I'm going back. It just doesn't like in the presentation mode apparently. Okay, back to this slide here. My apologies again. Okay, so you're expected to collect a fee if you open that door. If you don't put zero there, you're expected to collect the fee. So what I was referencing is our broker has to decide, we as United, are we going to have you bring that fee into the office and we'll collect a percentage of it, or we'll just say if it's below a certain percent, you keep it all. We just haven't come to that final answer yet. But that's what paragraph 5, showing services, is all about. All you're doing is opening a door and collecting a fee. Now, this form was really created for teams where maybe the owner of the listing agreement, let's say Joe Smith, he's got a listing agreement signed with this listing, right? And he's also an intermediary. But someone wants to show the house or see the house. Another buyer wants to see the house. But Joe, the current listing agent, who is an intermediary, isn't available. So he has one of his team members sign this document with the showing service clicked on. That's right there, that paragraph here that's not checked. And they do it for no charge because maybe the listing agent is giving you a fee to show the house. That's an example of why it's used. Now back here, if you choose the full service, you've got to fill out the broker's compensation. When earned and payable, client will pay broker, that's us. The buyer will pay United for purchases 2% or $2,500. Okay. Leases would be filled out if you're doing leases. Okay. Intermediary, you get the idea. We will be an intermediary potentially. So this is the new short form. Now, the caveats of the short form, which I have to point out, is we were told in our training that the short form may not be covered by E&O and insurance. So we're waiting on that official answer from all parties. But what that means is you are a showing service. You open a door for a potential buyer, and let's say they trip and fall and break their leg. What insurance is going to cover their medical expenses? That's why this form concerns me, because E&O may not cover it. And if you say, we'll sue the homeowner, and the homeowner says, nope, I don't have coverage, then they're going to come looking at you and then the broker. So just be aware of that. We're waiting officially the answer if E&O will cover the short form. All right, let's go to the next one. The 1505, the buyer-tenant rep agreement. Okay, amendment to the buyer-tenant rep agreement. So in my example, just we spoke about, you've signed the buyer rep just to let them show you some homes, and they said, yeah, we'll agree to pay 0.5%, but you found out that you're buying them a house that'll pay you much more. Well, unless you have the buyer state you can receive more than that 0.5 that we had on the buyer's rep agreement, then you're only going to get 0.5. So you come in here, for example, and paragraph C, if you'd said showing services only, you'd change to full services because you're going to write a contract for them now, and you're going to buy them a home. And it says, in our example, you've got a whopping 4.5% commission coming to you. You're probably buying them a new home. Okay. The other paragraph to be aware of on this slide is right here, paragraph E, TXR 1501 and TXR 1507 only. That's the buyer's rep agreement, remember. Bonuses and other compensation. Builders, which are not impacted by the NAR lawsuit, offer bonuses on many occasions. So you've got to tell your buyer that, for example, Highland Homes is offering you another 2% bonus on top of the 3% they've agreed to get you paid. Well, you can't hide that. You've got to come in here and say, in this bonus section, that you're going to be getting a figure, a dollar figure here, and the buyer has to agree to do that. The buyer might say, nope, I'm only going to allow you to take 1%, and I'm going to take the other 1%. So there's no more situations where the buyer gets to the table with the builder or the seller if they're offering a bonus and find out that you earned some commission that they did not authorize. So that is what you use if you're getting a bonus right here. Next slide. Compensation agreement between broker and owner, 2401. So we're still on the buying side. This is the document we've used with for sale by owner forever. Okay. So if you are dealing with an owner, not with another broker, you better make sure you have this signed. This says specifically that the owner will pay the broker X percentage to buy their house. Okay. All right. That's what this is. And you see down here, we're going to get 3%. Pretty simple form, not changed much, but this is the for sale by owner document, 2401. The next document, compensation agreement between brokers. Extremely important document now once the BAC disappears from MLS, because currently we can always at title say, yes, the MLS said they'd pay us 3%. On page 10 of the 1-to-4 contract, we had 3%, so we're going to get 3%. Well, on July 29th, that BAC disappears, so you're sitting at title, and title says, how much are you earning as a buyer's rep? Well, I'm earning 3%. Well, you better prove it. And this is a document that proves it. So my suggestion is when you send the offer over for your buyer to purchase a home, you've probably called the agent initially, or you found out somehow how much the seller's offering. And let's say they're offering 3%. Then you better send this document over and have the other broker sign it. So there is no disparity when you're at the closing table and you're saying, I'm earning 3%, and the seller says, no, you're not. Well, yes, you are, because you've got this agreement between brokers. And then what happens if the seller says, no, you're not? Well, then we go back to the listing agreement that the seller has with the listing agent to see what was put there. But you have determined through these legal documents that you are entitled to, in our example here, 2.5%. Okay. So all I'm saying on this slide is if you are the buying agent, make sure you get this signed by the other broker so that you are guaranteed your commission at closing. Next slide. Addendum regarding brokers' fees. Okay. Now the document we just went through was signed by the brokers. So because it was signed by the brokers, the seller or buyer aren't aware of that document between the brokers. Due to the lawsuit, the seller and the buyer must know how much is being paid, where it's coming from, and who it's going to. This is the addendum regarding brokers' fees, and this is signed by the seller and the buyer, not by the agents, okay? And you will need to probably reach out to your title officers to say, do I need this document? Some title companies might say, absolutely, we want this document signed and brought to closing as part of your package. Some might say, no, we're okay. Reach out to your title officers and make sure what they require. So to read through this form quickly, it says, this addendum should not be used with the farm and ranch. Okay, no problem there. Addendum controls. If any part of this addendum conflicts with the provision in the contract, this addendum will control. So what I'm saying is, in this case, the seller says, well, my listing agreement says I'm only paying 4%. Remember that early document, and I'm giving 2 to the buyer's agent? Well, things have changed. And now, Mr. Seller, you've signed this to say you're going to pay 3%. And this will override the listing agreement. So you make sure whichever side you're on, either the listing side or the buying side, you go through this document with your seller or buyer so they're not sitting at the closing table wondering where the money is coming from, because the buyer may be on the hook to pay part of your commission. That's why this is so important, because if they're sitting at the closing table and the buyer says, wait a minute, I didn't know I was paying a agent commission to my buyer's agent. Well, you better have discussed this with them so there is no surprise. And when you're signing the buyer's rep agreement in the first place, or the amendment to the buyer's rep agreement, your buyer should be aware that they may be on the hook for some amount of commission. Sorry, next slide. Seller's authorization to disclose and advertise certain information. What is this about? Remember, the listing agreement said, paragraph 11F, that the seller allows you, the selling agent or listing agent, whichever term you prefer, to disclose that they are offering some kind of concession. Now, as a poker player might do, they might tell the listing agent, okay, in our example, we were offering 2%, which on a $300,000 house is $6,000. But maybe the seller says, okay, Mr. Listing Agent, I will allow you to discuss it, but only up to, in this example, $5,000. Now, why would they do that? Well, they want a little leverage so they can come back without having to sign additional documents and keep $1,000 under the table. Not, that's a bad term, sorry. Keep $1,000 available so that the agent has further room to negotiate and the seller has further room to negotiate. The other reason this is used is, look at this, advertise. Many of us may have advertised properties or lands or farms in one of the realtor magazines, and we've just taken for granted that we're saying we're offering 3%. Nope, can't do that anymore. Unless you have this document signed and they tell you you can in paragraph 11F and how much you can say here. All right, that's TXR 1412. TXR 2701, what is this document? I mentioned in video number 1 that if you've got your listing agreement or buyer's rep agreement signed before the June 24th date that Metrotex or Netris in our cases put the new modified forms up on zip forms, you've basically got a dated buyer's rep agreement or listing agreement. But like I said, this office and our compliance team will allow you to continue to use that old buyer rep agreement, old listing agreement, if you get it signed, being the sale or buy, closed and funded before the August 17th deadline. But if you don't think you're going to hit the August 17th deadline, you need to go to your buyer or seller and present this TXR 2701. It's a one-page document. You can go right now to them if you'd like to, if you say, I just want to get it done. And that's fine, because it'll give you time to explain what's going on due to the NAR lawsuit. So in this example here, it says on or about June 23rd, the client and the broker entered a Texas Realtors rep agreement. Doesn't say buyer or seller at this time, it's just saying the client. Effective, and I put June 30th as the date, the buyer or the seller and United amend the above referenced representation agreement as follows. And you go here, for all representation agreements, A1, broker compensation or the sharing of compensation between brokers is not set. That's what it's all about. It is not set, it is negotiable. And that's what this paragraph is all about right here, A1. For listing agreement, so we're on the listing side. Client means the seller or landlord concerning the property at, so this just confirms your listing agreement, the one you've got listed. Paragraph 8A includes payment of compensation. So what it's saying is your old listing agreement, paragraph 8A was still viable. Paragraph 8A is gone in the new listing agreement, but it's saying in the old listing agreement, paragraph 8A includes payment of compensation to the other broker working with the buyer. So what that's saying is, Mr. Seller, you need to know that you are going to be paying a buyer's agent's commission via paragraph 8A. So just be aware of that. Paragraph 8B is deleted. Include totally. Fees stated in paragraph 8A are payable regardless of whether the other broker is a participant in the MLS in which the listing is filed. What that means is we may have a buyer's agent from Austin or San Antonio or Houston that comes up to Dallas and buys a home. Well, you're still going to pay him. All right. And then the buyer's tenant rep agreement. Broker is prohibited from receiving compensation for broker services from any source that exceeds the amount stated in the rep agreement. And that's what you're telling your buyer. You should have been telling your buyer that the whole time, because in my example, to get a buyer to walk in a house with me as their potential buyer's rep, they signed a 0.5% just to get them in the door, maybe 1%. I get them to sign anything so I can try to pick them up as a buyer is what I'm saying. And this is telling them that they are now knowing that we are not able to take any compensation from anywhere except what is stated in the buyer's rep agreement and the amount. Okay. That is the list of the forms. Again, there are 18 forms that have been modified or the 4 brand new. We don't have time to go through every one of them, but the ones that are going to be utilized the most we have discussed. If you have any questions, don't